talk about Extinction Rebellion. Environmental campaign group Extinction Rebellion have this week been staging protests in central London, with more planned action for today and over the weekend. Earlier, activists camped out on Parliament Square, and yesterday more than 300 people were arrested as demonstrators blocked Lambeth Bridge near the Houses of Parliament. Today will be day 4 of a possible 10 days of action planned by Extinction Rebellion. And we're joined by Rupert Read from Extinction Rebellion, who was arrested earlier this week for protesting. Hello, Rupert. Morning.
Hello.
Just tell us what you're planning. What's going to be going on today?
Well, there's stuff going on in Parliament Square, there's stuff going on in the city, and looking ahead, if I may, Vanessa, I'm very excited by something that's going on Sunday. Ocean Rebellion is launching, which means Extinction Rebellion taking to the issue of the crucialness of saving our seas. I think so many of us have understood since Blue Planet how crucial this is. Extinction Rebellion are going to be moving into this issue because our seas are at terrible risk from overfishing, from pollution, and of course from climate.
How will you be addressing the issue of our seas from the inner cities? I mean, that seems to be a bizarre connection. I mean, I realise all rivers eventually lead to the sea, but I mean, what are you going to do? Something in the River Thames, or what are you going to do?
What we're going to be doing is we're going to be marching around places in London where there is responsibility for the bad stuff that is going on in our oceans. So in particular, some of the big money which is behind ocean overfishing, behind pollution, behind the kinds of activities that are damaging our coral reefs. We're going to be drawing attention, shining a light on those who are most responsible for the damage to our ocean.
And when you say the big money behind the plundering of the ocean, the only thing I can think of, and I'm not trying to be fatuous or facetious, is kind of bird's eye fish fingers. I mean, who are you? Do you mean bird's eye? Who do you? I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing at my own terrible paucity of knowledge here. But I mean, who are we thinking about here?
Well, overfishing is big money. I mean, these are vast ships and vast firms. But the picture, of course, is much bigger than that. As I said, the coral reefs are at imminent risk, and they're at risk simply because the oceans are heating up, and they're heating up simply because of all the carbon emissions, the climate deadly carbon emissions being pumped into the atmosphere by all sorts of businesses, including, crucially, of course, the biggest polluters. So we're going to be targeting and talking about the biggest polluters, the oil companies, the money behind those and so forth on Sunday.
One of the issues always is, Rupert, I'm sure you appreciate this, that, you know, when you do something like Occupy Lambeth Bridge and delay people and interfere with individuals' lives and in their ability to get relatives to hospital or go out for lunch or whatever it is they were thinking of, get to work or do whatever, pick up the kids from school, you dictate to them. You say to them, you know, your life is now going to be interrupted by us. And I doubt that very many of the people stuck in traffic on Lambeth Bridge or trying to get across the bridge have anything to do with plundering the oceans and, you know, defacing the coral reef. So it's kind of not their fault or responsibility. And the fact that they're delayed doesn't mean that they can do anything about it anyway. So what is the point of the disruption when so many of the people affected by it can't do anything to help, really?
So in specific relation to Lambeth Bridge, what happened there yesterday was pretty much entirely the responsibility of the police. They actually blocked us in for several hours when basically the people who were there were just wanting to get, the cyclists who were there were just wanting to get across. But in terms of the general issue, yeah, of course, sometimes what we do disrupts people's lives. But Vanessa, you know, it's an absolute pinprick, the disruption compared to what's coming. And I think people have understood now for quite a while, since the beginning of Extinction Rebellion, that those kinds of disruptions that occur to people's lives if they get stuck in traffic for a couple of hours or something, that it really doesn't compare to the absolute vast disruption of our lives that is coming, which we got a sense of, I think, many of us this year in the coronavirus pandemic, when we realized that our food supplies could be disrupted, when we realized that tens of thousands of people's lives were at risk as a result of something which comes ultimately from ecological destruction. This is a crucial thing to understand. The coronavirus pandemic is part of.
But why do we think that when we know about the Black Death and cholera and the plague and all the other pestilences that have afflicted us, not caused by a devastation to the environment? Were they? Any of them? Weren't they an awfully long time ago?
No, I'm sorry,
before the
Vanessa,
Industrial Revolution and all that?
I need to correct you
Please do.
there. There is a rising tide of epidemics and pandemics. The science on this is extremely clear, and it's very clear that if we go on destroying ecosystems, if we go on damaging our climate, they're just going to get worse, and there are going to be worse things than coronavirus coming down the track. So this is really the key reason why we're here and why we're saying consciousness has changed on this issue. Many, many more people now understand that action has to be taken, but the action hasn't been taken. And that's why we and Greta Thunberg and the school climate strikers are continuing to say, for goodness sake, this really is pretty much our last chance now with the potential reset from the coronavirus. This is our last chance to get things right. And if we don't get things right, then there's not just going to be the kind of tiny elements of disruption that we cause. There's going to be vast disruption to our living systems, to our economies, to our lives. And that's why we say that actually Extinction Rebellion, you should think of it as the world's face mask. We're what's protecting the whole world against what's coming.
Do you think it is at all futile to disrupt big cities materially so that you get lots of coverage and everybody talks about it? And yes, you do air the subject, no question about it. And here you are on my show talking about it today. And then people get stuck and can't get home. People, can't do whatever it is they were thinking of doing because of the protests. And then at some point, I don't know whether it's days or weeks later, you all go home. And it stops being talked about and gets forgotten about. Nothing at all material changes. And then you do it again. I mean, do you think that you are progressing, that there's any point to what you're doing or any result to what you're doing?
Well, I understand your concern. I mean, Greta Thunberg said recently, we've been doing this stuff for 2 years. We've had enormous coverage, but what has actually changed? She's incredibly frustrated, and we're incredibly frustrated too. But that's actually the reason why our tactics are changing. That's why we're focusing much less on any kind of generalized disruption and much more on specific targets. So as I say, we're targeting those responsible for the damage to the oceans. We've been targeting quite strongly Parliament itself and certain kinds of ministries. You're going to see more stuff against some of those in the city who bear the strongest responsibility for the kind of changes that need to occur if we're going to have a future. So this is something for all of us, but there are some of us who are much more responsible than others, and we're taking the struggle directly to them. And what I would say to listeners is please support us or join us, because it's not going to change actually until we get a lot bigger. That's the reality of it. We need a lot more people on the streets. We need a lot more money going to the right kind of causes. When we get that kind of step change that you've seen in the past on other issues, for example, on issues such as civil rights in the United States, when we get truly huge numbers onto the streets, that's when we're going to get the changes that we also desperately need if our children are going to have a future.
Thank you for talking to us. Greatly appreciated. That is Rupert Read of Extinction Rebellion.